So I took the fire pit, and wanting to seal up all the extra holes where I don't want air to go, I went ahead and used a refractory mortar, mixed it up, and smeared it in all the cracks on the inside. Obviously it's not going to be perfect, but it should get most of the air gaps. The point is I'm trying to direct air through the air holes where I want it to go. I went ahead and scooped out a bunch of gravel, put some sand in there, maybe an inch or so, inch and a quarter, something like that, just to give me a little bit of a sand bed. The idea for the sand bed is more insulation for heat. Sand's a pretty good insulator from what I understand, so once the sand in is a good bed. And then I used the circle I had earlier used to set down, give my spacing for my stones, the cardboard, traced it out on a bunch of fire bricks, and then cut them out on the wet saw. And I'm going to go ahead and line the bottom of it with fire brick, and then I'm going to put fire brick to cover that 4 ounces on the bottom that I want that the metal ring won't cover. So I'm going to put these in place, and then we'll go from there. So I've got the fire brick in the bottom of my fire pit. I decided to just go ahead and put fire brick in the bottom. It cost me a little more money, but I think it's going to be a more permanent, less fuss solution, so I'm willing to give that a try. And I'm going to be putting bricks around the bottom to take up that extra bottom layer there where my metal insert ring won't cover. What I did is I made a little jig here. Of course, I just put gravel down, fine gravel, and then I went ahead and put some sand down, mainly the sand kind of as a heat insulator under the fire brick and to take up the little cracks and to fill up the edges. Went ahead and made me a little jig. I cut it to exactly 9 13/16, which is how far the fire pit ring goes down exactly as I measured. And that way I'll know, I can measure down on the bricks once I get them in place exactly where I know how wide to cut them, so that when the fire pit ring sits down in here, it'll sit down right on top of the bricks. So I went ahead and modeled this out in SketchUp also last night to get the size of my the blocks in between, what they need to be and the angle they need to be at. According to what I'm drawing up, they need to be 3 inches wide at the base, 2 inches at the top, which ends up being a 22.5 inch angle, which is real convenient because that's easy to measure. So I'll be cutting them out here in a little bit and start putting them in place, and then once I get all these cut, then I'll be using more of the mortar, the Rutland mortar mix, to go ahead and mortar them in place. So to get these filler blocks, or the blocks to kind of make the curve on this fire bricks, I had to come up with some kind of jig, because this saw by itself is only set up to do 0 and 45. So I made a little sled, as you can see here, cut it on my table saw at a 22.5 angle, which is what it measured out to. Cut the table saw through, all the way through back to about here. And then this piece right here is what's holding this whole thing together. So this is attached to this, which is attached to this. That way the saw blade can go through and I can get a clean cut. And I just had to raise the blade up a bit, turn the miter to about 22.5, which I used to get that angle right. I just took a piece of wood on my miter saw and cut it at 22.5 degrees and use that to set the angle of the blade. That way I know the blade angle will be right. So by using this little sled I came up with, this is allowing me to cut these little pieces to make the corners for the fire ring, for the fire bricks. So now that I've cut all my little wedges out, and then I've recut this circle, I remeasured it and made the circle to 30 inches across, which is the same diameter as the metal ring. I want to make sure that when the metal ring sits on here, it's going to sit on top of the fire bricks underneath. And this is the only way I'm going to do it, so I'm doing this so that it sits on the bricks. The little spaces in between are fine because I'm going to be using the Rutland mortar anyway on that. And then I also went through and used my little template here for the depth, and went through and actually just physically put it on each of the blocks and then marked where that 9 13/16, which is the depth of the fire, and where it comes to on each block, because the fire brick floor is not going to be level, nor do I want it to be level. I want to make sure it drains. So I went ahead and I've gone around on the fire bricks themselves, and I made marks, and then I'm going to put them on the tile saw and cut them out. So that should get me real close to where the fire ring is actually going to sit. Oh, so I got the bricks all mortared in. I kind of put mortar between the bricks, underneath them, fire bricks, and then put them down. And then I went ahead and poured some mortar real thin and actually poured it behind them. I don't know if you can see that, to give some support around the bottom of them as well. Try to make sure they're not going to go anywhere. So we're going to set the fire ring on top of it here in a minute and see how we did. Worst case scenario, if there's still if some of them are too high or something, then I can just grind down the bottom of the fire pit a little bit and adjust it accordingly.